So first of all, good morning, everyone, and thank you for inviting me to briefly tell you something about open science communities and how I was involved in those. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the background of open science community, what they are, and why we need them. So I've been involved in various open science initiatives on a national, but also on an international level for almost 15 years. And the idea of a community basically started when I had coffee with a colleague, Luc Brinkman, who is here on the slide, in 2017. Now, I didn't know Luc at all. We did work at the same university, but in different faculties. And someone who we both knew thought it would be good for us to meet and to talk about open science because we were both passionate about open science and we really wanted to do something on that topic. So we went out for a coffee and we talked about open science. And there were a few observations that we both had at the time, and that basically formed the basis for the open science community that we would launch 1 year after that first coffee. A first observation that we had was that people often didn't know colleagues who were working on open science. I already mentioned that I didn't know Luc, but he was passionate about open science. He knew other people that were passionate about open science, but we didn't know each other. So that was a first observation that we thought was kind of weird and that we wanted to change. A second observation was that it is hard to reach out to people outside of the open science bubble. So we knew about events, symposia, workshops, get-togethers that were organized around the theme of open science, but we always encountered the same people there. So it seemed as if there was this core group of people that were passionate about open science and that met at these events, but the circle of people attending didn't really seem to grow very quickly. And a third observation that we thought was interesting was that implementing open science was viewed as difficult, time-consuming, and not rewarding at all. So we thought that is also something that needs to change. It needs to be more easy to implement open science. It needs to be more fun. You need to know why you want to do it. You need to get something out of it, and it should be rewarded as well. So we really wondered, can we bring together researchers locally, have them learn from each other in a safe space where they can also openly discuss issues with implementing open science? And it turned out that yes, we can. So let's take a look at the problem. But it might be helpful to start with a definition of open science. Now, for me, open science entails practices aimed at the accessibility, transparency, robustness, and inclusiveness in science in order to facilitate scientific progress. And it is thought that open science, it's thought that open science improves the way we conduct science. And for over a decade, researchers that were intrinsically motivated to conduct open science, so the people that I already described attending all these conferences and symposia and whatnot, those people who were intrinsically motivated, those have been involved in open science practices. But the transition to open science really has been slow up to that point. And for a large-scale adoption of any behavioral change, but also the adoption of open science practices, it is important that we reach people beyond the innovators and the early adopters. So we need people outside of the open science bubble, the early and late majority, to get involved if we really want to bring about a culture change in science. Now, one way to get more people involved might be by having open science policies in place, and that can be on a local level. So your university can have policies about open science. could also be on a national or even an international level. And you see this more and more. For example, funding agencies in the Netherlands have been asking about a data management plan, about publishing all the work that they funded, open access. You see this also at universities, where universities want their employees to publish open access, for example. You see it also with journals. They offer new formats, and they also seem to request sometimes from authors to make their data publicly available, for example. So you see more and more policies in place to force people basically to adopt open science practices. But having policies in place will not automatically make people adopt open science practices. Some people, we will call them the experts, they already practice open science. So for them, having policies in place will not make them practice open science. They are already motivated to do so. But there's a large group of people that are not yet practicing open science, but they are at least interested in it. Now, for them to adopt open science practices, they need to know what open science is and how you can practice open science and why you should actually do so. And for this group, having policies in place also is not sufficient, because if you have to adhere to a policy but you don't know why or how, that's not going to help you. And then finally, there's a group of researchers that are more or less ignorant when it comes to open science. They either don't care or they are against open science. And those researchers will probably only adopt open science practices if they really have to know. For this group, policies might actually help because then they are forced to adopt open science practices. And what I would like to stress today is that it's not a matter of whether there will be a transition to open science or not, because the transition has already begun. And therefore, it is important to make this transition as easy as possible for everyone. So we should help each other, we should share experiences and knowledge, and we should get together to discuss open science and inventorize the need for support, especially if there are policies in place on a local or national level. It's crucial that policymakers know what support is needed from the people that have to adhere to their policies. Now, this is exactly where an open science community comes into play. Because the goals of an open science community are to make open science more visible and accessible, make open science knowledge more visible and accessible, and to promote peer-to-peer knowledge exchange. A second goal of an open science community is to inspire and enable researchers to take the next small step. So do not require people to adopt all open science practices overnight, but stimulate them to take the next step, to try out a pre-registration, for example, or to publish a paper open access. I think, small steps will go a long way. And the final goal of an open science community is to identify obstacles and need for support to inform policymakers. So the main idea is to help those interested in open science to get more involved so that they can then help out others as well. Now, if we go back to the innovation adaptation lifecycle and we add a layer of interventions for each innovation, so the innovation adaptation lifecycle is by Rogers. And then there are different levels of interventions that were defined by Brian Nosek. Now you can very nicely combine those two figures, and then you will see that there are different interventions for different stages of the innovation people are in. So for the people that are intrinsically motivated, so the innovators, it is important that if they want to make a change, that there is infrastructure. you need to make the change possible. And you see that there's a lot of infrastructure out there. There are platforms to easily share your data. There are tools to pre-register your study. There are outlets for preprint. So that's all the infrastructure of open science. And you see that for the laggards, so the people that lag behind, you see that having policies in place will probably help them adopt new practices. But to reach out to the early and the late majority, you will see that communities are crucial, because communities can make new behavior, like open science practices, normative. So that is why we need open science communities. We need those to reach out to the majority of people, to make open science practices normative. And then you can see that the innovation will reach a tipping point, after which open science practices will become the new norm. Now let's take a closer look at what an open science community is. Luc Brinkman, the guy that I had coffee with in 2017, and I started the first open science community at our university, at Utrecht University. So that's where we both worked at the time. And we launched that community in 2018. And to be honest, Luc and I really had no clue what we got ourselves into. We just very much liked the idea of a community of people helping out each other. And we just started, and we figured out a way to form our community by trial and error. But one of the first things that we did was to have a website in place. Now, we were both web designers, so it was not very nicely looking, but it was functional. And we needed this website to communicate, to explain to people what we envisioned. So what we thought our initiative was about, what we wanted, our goals. And another important aspect was that we wanted members of our community to be visible on our website, to show, to literally give the community a face, and to facilitate the knowledge exchange. We gave people that signed up as a member the opportunity to indicate what kind of open science practices they already had a little bit of experience with. So we specifically did not ask, what are you an expert on? But what have you already tried, or what have you been involved in? And people could also indicate the things they would like to learn more about. So what you can then do is some kind of a matchmaking, bring colleagues together, those who have a little experience with a certain practice and those who would like to learn more about a certain topic. So that was one of the first things that we did when we started the community. And we didn't launch the website until we had about 20 members on there, because if you display an empty website with no members, no one's willing to sign up and join your community, because it doesn't look like a fun thing to do. Then we also started with a monthly newsletter to let people know what was going on in the community, to let them know that we still existed. And we started organizing events. And at first we organized events for the whole university on a certain topic, but we found out that really didn't attract a lot of people, because it was too general. People didn't feel that event was something for them specifically. So we then switched to half-day symposia per faculty, where you could really dive into different open science practices that are most relevant to researchers in that research area. And that actually really went well. So that was something where we had an idea, we found out it didn't really work. So we came up with another idea that worked better. So this is also some advice that we give other community managers as well. Now, over the years, by trial and error, we gained a lot of knowledge, and we found out that, some things worked well, others not so much, and then we had to find ways to improve the community. And we thought it would be great if others could learn from our experiences. So we created fairly early on a starter kit, which is freely available. And it's just a document about how we started in Utrecht. And more people were interested in starting their own local open science community. And before we knew it, almost every university in the Netherlands had their own local open science community. And even abroad, very early on, we had an open science community in Ireland, in Galway, and also one in Sweden was founded. And we grew so fast, so quickly, that we encountered things that we didn't thought of beforehand. So once there was a bunch of open science communities, we thought, well, we should somehow define what it means to be an open science community. Of course, everyone can start their own community, but if you want to hook up with these communities, there should be some kind of guiding principles that we all share so that we know what we talk about when we talk about an open science community. So we created guiding principles, a code of conduct for all the events, and a style guide for the use of the logo. Now, if new communities adhere to all these principles, then they can become part of the international network of open science and scholarship communities. And all this information is on the umbrella or the overarching website of the international network. And I listed the incubator program. I know that one person who started your local open science community actually followed that program. It's a 12-week program where we help people interested in starting their own open science community to actually do so by giving them specific assignments to think about the vision and the mission of their community, which is really fun to do, by the way. Let's see. Yeah, now 5 years after the launch of the first open science community of this kind in Utrecht, there are now 27 other communities and 6 are in the process of becoming a community. Now, while local communities are strong on the local level, they could also join forces and impact the transition to open science on a larger scale. And there's so much value in learning from each other's experiences in setting up, running, and maintaining a local community. So that's why we came up with the idea of the international network. Yeah, and this is something about how the network is organized. So not individual members of open science communities are the members of the network. It's the local communities that are a member of the network. And every local community has one open science community representative who is part of INOSC and who has regular meetings with the board. The board consists of 6 people that are elected. And I am the current chair of this network. So we meet on a regular basis to see where we can help communities and where we can join forces to have more influence on the international level. And I'd like to end this brief talk with some advice on how you can help your local open science community to flourish. Because a community is not healthy if it's just a group of people organizing everything, coming up with every plan, and if the members are not really active. It's a community, so it's something that belongs to, well, the researchers and those interested in research. So if you want to help your local community to flourish, then become a member, help organize events, be active, initiate things, and very important, talk to others about this. Talk to your colleagues, your students, your supervisors, talk to policymakers so that they know that there is this community and that others will want to join as well, because the larger the community, the more interactions between the members, the healthier and the more impactful your community can be. And that's what I wanted to share with you today.